Welcome to Insight Talks, brought to you by Outlook in association with Johnson Tiles. This is a conversation series with architects and designers. It's not typically about their landmark projects or awards they won. It's about them as a person, as a creator, a master, and a learner. The interviews are taken by filmmaker Aradhana Seth in very informal and free-flowing style. And let me tell you, every conversation has very interesting and inspiring stories. Hello and namaste, I am Dinesh Vyas and I welcome you to the Insight Talks brought to you by Outlook in association with Prism Johnson. In this episode, Aradhana Seth is in conversation with Pune-based architect Chaitanya Peshave. Mr. Chaitanya has completed his Masters in Architecture from University of Southern California, US in 1998. He has a very simple and relatable philosophy in life which reflects in his projects, many of which are landmark in themselves. Let us join him at Insight Talks.
How you got into architecture?
Actually, we are a family of architects. My dad was architect to start with, then my sister, elder sister, and so basically I was naturally inclined right from my childhood because watching them being architects and drawing and so on and so forth. So I kind of picked it up at a very early age, and I also wanted to become an architect. To my own peril later on, of course, when I realized that it is such a difficult profession. So there is this institute in Pune which is called as the BKPS College of Architecture, my alma mater, and so I studied over there for 5 years, and after that did my stint with my dad's office, and simultaneously applied for a couple of universities. Got into University of Southern California because they had a very good program for urban design, so that was always a focus, urban design and city planning, and that's how I ended up for the postgraduate studies in urban design.
And did you stay on in California and work with an architectural firm?
Yes.
For a bit and then decide to come back and join your dad or set up your own practice?
So yes, I definitely, I would have liked to stay longer. I worked in Los Angeles area for 2 years after that, and after completing my master's degree in architecture, and then I was kind of always inclined to come back and join my dad's office. So after that, I decided that I'll kind of backpack across from America to India. So so I did that.
And joined the business and got married, everything at the same time after backpacking and...
Yeah, exactly. It's a typical storyline as such. It was difficult. I mean, the acclimatization period over here after working over there in the West was a little bit difficult, but the freedom was tremendous to really, so that is what was always the kind of a driving force, that to do things on your own and not have somebody tell you how to design. I think that is a self-learning process and self-work.
And what did you bring to the table? I mean, what sort of projects was he doing anyway?
So my dad's practice was primarily in the speculative real estate field. So he was working for a lot of developers, so mainstream developers, residential, commercial projects. My focus was always on urban design and space making and space planning. So I had an inclination to do a lot of public projects. The first project that I did was this campus for AISSMS. There is an institute adjacent to RTO campus here in Pune on Raja Bahadur Mills Road. So there's this educational campus and this institute called AISSMS. This particular institute, AISSMS, is actually an institute which started the first military school here in Pune. But being primarily a military school, they had been given for maintenance and upkeep a war plane which India had captured during the Pakistan war. I remember the first time when I went, this is like, which educational campus actually gets a plane as part of their assets? So I mean, it was lying in the kind of a backyard space. So what we did was we actually decided to bring that airplane into the front face of the campus. So it became the entire campus open space got structured around that aeroplane. So we kind of lifted that aeroplane on a podium so that it can be seen from the main street. There were a lot of issues. There was a lack of identity to the campus because everything was very inward looking. There was not an external edge to the campus. So, dealing spatially, we decided to kind of create a face for the campus on the main road, and the aeroplane actually became an important element of that. So the whole thing was lifted off of the ground on a podium, and so that actually whenever anybody is passing on that street, that is the first thing that they notice, because buildings you have everywhere. No building has an aeroplane as its front fascia. So that was an interesting project, and I was very fortunate to actually explore a lot of spatial concepts in that particular campus, especially ideas that I had actually focused on during my postgraduate studies in architecture and urban design, such as place making and space making for large communities, especially in educational campuses, for a large group of students. So yeah, introduction of some amphitheaters, creating these community spaces within the campus, all of the buildings becoming more of a cohesive unit rather than being separate buildings. So all these ideas and concepts I tried to, fresh out of grad school, I kind of tried to implement all these ideas. Of course, I didn't have any experience as far as construction is concerned, but that's where my dad actually contributed a lot. And
As institutions, what is the difference when you do a hospital versus a educational institution?
yeah, hospitals have a very clear distinction as to the public spaces which are within the hospitals and the spaces which are the service areas. For example, the operation theaters, the maternity, the labor rooms, and so on and so forth. These are all very private areas. So that especially now, most of our focus has been on hospitals which are being constructed and operated by the Pune Municipal Corporation. So one of the things is, in the Indian context, I have always felt that when you have one patient, there are about 10 other relatives who are with the patient, who are wanting to be in that space. Irrespectively, the patient will be fine, but there are 10 relatives waiting outside in the lobby. There's one interesting story that I had seen. There was this hospital project for Pune Municipal Corporation, and I was just making a round of the existing facility with the doctors of the Pune Municipal Corporation, and I said, there were these people who were actually there. It was a maternity ward, and underneath the bed there were people living and sleeping underneath the bed. So it's like, yeah, it's the relative. She's sleeping under the bed, so it's normal. She didn't feel anything odd about it. So there is this patient who is occupying the bed, and the relative is actually underneath the bed. So this is how it works in the
yeah. What is the kind of material that you're using?
As far as the flooring is concerned, vitrified tiles is the go-to material. Natural stone utilization has become very difficult because the kind of quality of material that we are getting is not even. Especially things like Kota. Kota was the go-to material for public projects, but the quality of Kota that you get is no longer even. You have green and grey and yellow shades of Kota coming in. So, the natural choice now has shifted to vitrified tiles. Your anti-static floors required for OTs and your ICUs and spaces like that. Wall tiles is a common feature in hospitals because, especially in the public projects, spitting is I think it's a national pastime for us, and so that is a big problem which is faced in a lot of these public hospitals. So we need to have dado tiles clad. So we have been looking at exploring non-ceramic options, such as again cladding with vitrified tiles itself, because vitrified tiles actually become much more you can actually explore different options in terms of matte finish and kind of creating a universal palette of the flooring and the wall tile dado. So create like a seamless thing. So those are some of the options that we have been exploring. Because otherwise it becomes like a circus in the hospital. You have these different ceramic tiles cladding on the walls, and the floors are in a different color, and so.
And has anything, Chaitanya, changed post-COVID in the hospital projects?
especially the private hospitals, depended on a substantial amount of artificial ventilation for their systems to operate. And that we have found out in COVID is a real problem, because you cannot have in the scenario of a pandemic all the spaces ventilated. So natural light and ventilation is kind of become the quintessential aspect of these new modern hospital designs. It was always that, but then because that technology was available, it was utilized to no end, and we made hospitals which were more claustrophobic, more artificially ventilated. So now again that focus has shifted, that everything has to be very light and very airy. Public spaces have to be very, introduction of semi-open spaces, courtyards within hospitals, external public lobbies. So the concepts, as there is a kind of a reintroduction of concepts which was intrinsic to architectural making in the first place. So it's kind of a reinventing of these ideas.
Do you feel that ceramic tiles has become the go-to option in today's day?
Definitely it has. And one of the primary reasons for that is twofold. First of all, the availability of natural stone from a qualitative perspective. To have an even grain and an even kind of a grade of natural stone available, maybe it kota or marble, there are certain limitations to that. So that is one thing. Second thing is the artisans who actually work on that. I call them the artisans and the craftsmen, because it's really an art and craft, really. And that has become a little bit, there is a reduction in the quantum of people who are actually working in that. And not to mention that it is becoming so specialized that the cost becomes another issue. And where we are in the age of mass production, and especially the time requirement is tremendously squeezed. In that particular context, it becomes very difficult, especially in public projects, to actually look at natural stone as a go-to option. And therefore the vitrified tile naturally and very logically, because of all the solutions which it actually becomes the answer to, becomes a natural choice for any of these projects. So there are this whole range of vitrified tiles which are mimicking natural products, natural elements. So I think that's an interesting thing to work with. Of course, the limitations is that it will always be a kind of a copy of the natural, not really the real thing. So that is something which is, but from a populist perspective, I think those issues don't matter. When you look at a public project especially, people are just happy in the sense that you have a feel which is of that of a natural material, and you have that rustic quality of that stone which you had already admired, and it's there. But going beyond that, nobody goes to the issues of what is real and what is something which is kind of a copy of what the real thing is. So yes, and add to it the issues of cost, the timelines in which these floors can be done up, and the use of tiles makes it so much easier than actually going through the entire process of selecting the natural stone, procuring it, getting the right kind of artisans and craftsmen, going through all the processes of execution, and then having something to show. So it's kind of the easy way out.
Yeah, 45-degree angle cutting. And yeah, they're now, most of the really good craftsmen are working on on buildings that are really architecturally known. And how do you marry architecture with technology? Like, where does it come? How does it come in? Since you have an office of lots of rolled up paper, both starting from the office and in the...
Yeah, so I mean, I think digitalization has changed the way architects work tremendously. I mean, that is universal, and that is something which I actually feel that it has changed the nature of buildings also. The vocabulary, the architectural vocabulary has changed because of digitalization. Some things which, there are all these advanced things which are not really manifested in the mainstream, but issues like parametric modeling, where actually you look at buildings are a result of certain software related tweaking. is completely unheard of. I mean, architecture and building making was always, it was all about the mind, but where a software actually decides how that building should look and sort of what are the issues that can be incorporated into building is a new thing. Technology per se, a lot of transformation has happened because it has made space so much more flexible. I can recollect at a time during the earlier times where we in the sense my dad used to work with these very restricted grids. Now with the use of things like post tension slabs, flat slabs, you can have large spans of structures, which makes the space even more interesting and actually suffices. So I think that technology is making life much more livable as far as architecture making is concerned. I'm a little bit of a conservationist, so I'm more conservative in my approach to architecture. So as far as that digital thing is concerned, I still like to put pencil on paper, and that is, I think, is the only way to visualize and design. So I have not really come into that mainstream where I'm looking at issues like parametric modeling and how actually that modeling actually develops the design for buildings. That exploration of technology is not the primary for me, the primary design driver, but the other way around. If technology actually helps in making the space much more nicer and much more easier and much more people friendly and community oriented, I think I will definitely go for it. But it is not the other way around. I will not make a project because I want to explore a particular technology.
What advice would you give to young architects today?
One of the primary and very basic advice I would give is make yourself capable in terms of enhancing your skill sets tremendously, because I think it is the age of digitalization, and really that is something, if I were given a chance, that is something which I would really actually invest myself into, make myself tremendously digital savvy on that front. As far as the larger kind of aspects which govern architectural education and profession, I will say that persistence and perseverance. I think these are the two key issues which every architect must essentially kind of inculcate to actually make it through this difficult profession.
Also, do you have any people that you admire? What are the architects who you admire?
If I had to name one, I will name architect B.V. Doshi. He has stylistically, not just stylistically evolved, but his vocabulary has changed and he has adapted, and it has, right from his earlier projects where he was working with architect Le Corbusier and fresh influences, and then the subsequent developments. Every project, is kind of this exuberant evolution in his architectural vocabulary. That is something which is, and being a person who is more than 90 years old now, I think he's still going strong, and that is something which I really admire. And he doesn't have a particular fixed vocabulary as such. It's a continuously evolving. If you look at the projects which have happened over a period of time, every project has a new addition to it, a new evolution in terms of its vocabulary. Different ideas have been explored. I mean, and still being very subtle and down to earth and very grounded.
Which are the buildings that you particularly, which are the places that you particularly admire of his?
I think the CEPT campus is one of the best places. Being actually involved in a lot of educational institutes, the way that section has evolved in the architecture school, I think that is amazing. So where actually that central courtyard is so much close to the studio spaces inside. It's a 3-story building, but then the way the ground level has been modulated in such a way that the courtyard becomes an intrinsic part of the studio space, and that community interaction between the studios and the courtyard, and these ideas are absolutely fantastic.
And what do you think of the new library that's come into the...
Oh, the one by RMA?
Yes.
Yeah. I think that is also an interesting project. One of the things that I've always believed in, that architecture should not be copied as such. So you cannot really kind of repeat that vocabulary. CEPT was developed in a particular period of time. It has its own identity. To actually copy something like that would be pastiche. So in that sense, the project by Rahul Mehrotra, I think I enjoy the project very well. So that idea about having the whole thing dug underneath and to evolve that space, I think it's a good. The vocabulary itself, I have a little bit of a reservation. It seems a little bit too stark in contrast to the soft, natural brick vocabulary of SEP building. But other than that, I think the basic organization of spaces within the library, I think, is very interesting.
Could you tell me a little bit about your own projects, how many you're involved with at the moment, and what they are, and also your own vocabulary, architectural vocabulary?
Yes. So as far as my projects, I have a wide range of projects. I mean, there are, as I said earlier, the public projects where I have the hospitals and the educational institutes which I am working on, and then the builder projects which are the speculative housing, commercial development, which are mainstream speculative projects, which are my bread and butter projects. So. As far as my architectural vocabulary and my architectural pursuit is concerned, I have always been kind of enamored by the in-between spaces. So the voids in architecture are for me what actually make the architecture, and it is not the solids. So how do you enrich the voids? That has been a continuous quest since my postgraduate studies, that how do you make the unbuilt spaces the most interesting spaces within an architectural project? Because I think those are the least regarded projects, least regarded spaces, because everybody is concentrating more on the solid. So what is the void that becomes carved into that solid is what I'm interested in. So the courtyard spaces, all the terraces and the community spaces, which are all carved out from the project, which are these loose spaces which actually gel all the different built components together. That is the domain that I'm really interested in. And how does that interface with the built, then the landscape in between? So this kind of layering of spaces, the unbuilt, then the transitory spaces and the built, I think that coming together of all these different layers is what actually excites me a lot in architecture. The one project which I had an opportunity to work on these concepts was the AISSMS campus, where I was actually looking at a network of such interstitial spaces which connect all the different components of the campus together. Miles to go before you sleep. That is kind of it. I think it was made for architects.
These insight talks will acquaint you with the architect's professional approach, values that they respect and expect, their philosophy, and above all, how they look at life, other people, and this very planet. Let us join the respected professional at Inside Story. And just to add, Prism Johnson is engaged with the fraternity of designers in multiple ways, which includes publication of reputed journal Insight. You can also receive very rich and professional content by subscribing to the newsletter from insidereview.in. Thank you very much.